I'm Eliza Matthews, 32 years old, an age many people call the start of middle age, where life's cracks aren't visible bruises anymore, but quiet, lingering wounds that stretch across the years. I've built a successful career in finance, but in my father's eyes, I've always been a failure. Our annual family reunion is coming up again, and I dread it now more than ever. This year, I bought him a luxury car as a peace offering, hoping maybe, just maybe, things would change. I never expected that sitting quietly in my purse was a document that would turn my entire life upside down. That night, I finally understood why my father had never loved me all these years. Before I go on with my story, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to face someone who refuses to see your true worth, please hit like, subscribe, and stick with me. Trust me, my story just might give you the courage to finally stand up for yourself. The Matthews family always looked like the perfect picture from the outside, a wealthy, upper-class family living in an upscale Boston suburb with a beautiful mansion, luxury cars, and enviable social circles. Everything seemed flawless. The carefully staged family portraits, the lavish parties where powerful businessmen toasted to each other's success. But behind the closed doors of that grand house, no one knew it was a place filled with pressure, suffocating expectations, and constant tension. Richard Matthews, the head of the family, valued success and social status above all else. He didn't accept weakness, mistakes, or failure from his children. Genuine praise from him was a rare reward that all three of us desperately chased, but almost never received. To outsiders, the Matthews family sparkled with success, but no one noticed the deep cracks quietly spreading inside each of us. For me, those cracks were painfully personal. My father's expectations were like a giant shadow looming over me since childhood, making me grow up terrified of being seen as worthless and forever chasing a standard I could never reach. Richard Matthews built his real estate empire from nothing and became the ultimate symbol of success in society. To him, life was a battlefield where a person's worth was measured strictly by visible achievements, money, power, and reputation. In his eyes, those were the only things that mattered. He always carried himself as calm and polished in public, but behind that perfect image was a cold, rigid father who ruled his family with an iron grip. I, his second daughter, Eliza, spent years chasing accomplishments most people would admire, but none of it was ever enough for him. He dismissed everything I achieved as meaningless numbers on paper, things he believed could never compare to the long-lasting value of real estate and social status that he and my older brother were building together. His indifference wasn't just in his words. It was in his eyes, his gestures, the way he completely ignored me whenever I entered the room. For years, he tore down my every effort, treating it as nothing more than a childish attempt to get attention, as if I never really had a place in his family. Caroline, Eliza's mother, was a woman who always appeared gentle, warm, and quietly attentive to her children, at least when Richard wasn't home. To Eliza, her mother was the only source of warmth in the family, someone who silently watched over her children with eyes full of love but also weighed down by sadness. But that gentleness only existed in private moments. Whenever Richard was around, Caroline seemed to transform into a completely different person. She became silent, withdrawn, always avoiding her husband's gaze, and never once dared to stand up for her daughter, even when she knew Richard was being unfair. At family dinners, Caroline would simply nod and follow Richard's lead without question, never daring to express her own opinions. She would always glance quickly at Richard before answering even the simplest question, as if every word she spoke needed his approval. Her obedience wasn't just a habit. It had become second nature after so many years living under his shadow. Eliza often felt a deep pain watching her mother's silence in the very moments she needed her most. Caroline's passive indifference forced Eliza to learn to face her pain alone, but deep down, Eliza always longed for her mother to stand up for her, just once. James, Eliza's older brother, was Richard Matthews' golden child, the perfect son in his father's eyes and the pride of the family. From an early age, James had every quality Richard admired: intelligence, athleticism, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to following in the family's real estate footsteps. He carried himself with quiet confidence, always surrounded by praise from relatives and Richard's business associates. James seemed to intuitively understand how to win Richard's approval, from the sports he chose to play, to the relationships he built, to the exact career path his father laid out for him. He earned recognition, trust, and the love that Eliza spent her entire life chasing but could never reach. James' success wasn't just about results. It became the measuring stick Richard used to constantly compare and belittle Eliza. Every time James achieved something, Richard would shower him with praise and use those accomplishments to highlight Eliza's perceived shortcomings. Although James rarely insulted Eliza directly, his cold indifference toward her pain only widened the distance between them. To Eliza, James wasn't just her brother. He was the living, breathing symbol of the perfection she was forced to chase for her entire life. James, Eliza's brother, had always been Richard Matthews' ideal son and the pride of the Matthews family. Since childhood, James excelled in every area Richard valued. He was a star athlete, a top student, and he followed the career path Richard had carefully mapped out for him. Not only did James step into the family's real estate empire, but he was also seen as the perfect heir to the Matthews legacy. Every decision James made was fully supported by Richard, and even his smallest failures were met with protection and forgiveness from his father. At family gatherings, James was always the center of attention, and Richard never hesitated to publicly praise him in front of relatives and business partners. James' success wasn't just Richard's pride. It became the very standard Richard used to belittle Eliza. Even though James was fully aware of his father's favoritism, he never once spoke up to defend his sister. He passively accepted his higher place in the family and sometimes even echoed Richard's condescending remarks toward Eliza, as if to reinforce the family hierarchy. To James, maintaining his good standing with Richard mattered far more than the bond of siblinghood. Eliza often felt completely alone whenever she faced her brother, a man who not only didn't understand her pain but also quietly upheld the very coldness that pushed her away. Eliza Matthews was always labeled as the failure by her father, no matter how many remarkable achievements she earned, achievements that anyone else would admire. Ever since she was a child, Eliza had lived under the heavy shadow of her powerful father and her seemingly perfect older brother. She worked tirelessly, studied relentlessly, won a full scholarship to a prestigious university, and built a successful career in finance entirely on her own. Without any help from her family, Eliza gradually carved out her place in the world, eventually becoming a highly respected investment strategist. But to Richard Matthews, her father, none of that meant anything. He constantly dismissed her accomplishments, insisting that she was chasing meaningless, temporary success. Eliza never once heard a genuine compliment from her father. She never saw pride in his eyes, never felt the smallest gesture of care. His coldness and constant disregard became a silent wound that followed her throughout her childhood and well into adulthood. Eliza grew up desperately longing for recognition, for the simple love that seemed freely given to the other children in the family, but always withheld from her. Her pain didn't just come from Richard's harshness. It came from the deep, aching sense of being excluded, of always feeling like an outsider in her own home. Outwardly, Eliza appeared strong and independent, but deep down, she was still that lost little girl, tirelessly searching for unconditional acceptance from her distant father. Eliza Matthews is the central figure in this story, a woman who spent her entire youth chasing something that should have been simple, her father's approval. Although Eliza achieved incredible success, accomplishments that anyone else would have celebrated, Richard Matthews, the cold, distant father, continued to see her as his greatest disappointment. Throughout her life, Eliza pushed herself beyond her limits, excelling in school, working her way up through one of New York's most prestigious financial firms, and becoming entirely self-made, never once leaning on family connections. Yet to Richard, her efforts were worthless. He constantly dismissed her success as shallow personal ambition, as fleeting achievements that could never compare to the solid real estate empire he was building with his favored son, James. Eliza was trapped in a painful cycle of loneliness and rejection, where everything she worked for was downplayed, twisted, and ultimately denied. Still, she couldn't stop hoping that one day her father would turn around, truly see her, and finally feel proud. Eliza was like a swimmer, stranded in the middle of a vast ocean, exhausted but still desperately pushing toward a distant shore. A shore where she believed love and acceptance were waiting for her, even though that shore had never really existed. Eliza Matthews once stood at a major crossroads in her life when her father, Richard Matthews, offered her a position at the family's real estate company. For many, this would have been the perfect opportunity, a shortcut to a stable career and perhaps the long-awaited recognition from her family. But for Eliza, that offer felt like a trap, a chain that would permanently tie her to her father's and brother's shadows. Eliza firmly turned it down. She knew that if she accepted, her efforts would forever be dismissed as products of privilege, as the result of family connections rather than her true abilities. She chose to walk away from Boston, leaving behind the comfort and easy path her family could have provided, to start over in New York, a harsh, unfamiliar city. Eliza arrived in New York with nothing but 2 small suitcases. She crashed on friends' couches and relentlessly applied to dozens of financial firms. With no family support, no one to shield her, she had to fight through every obstacle on her own. This choice wasn't just about a job. It was her way of proving her worth and breaking free from the failure label Richard Matthews had stamped on her for years. Eliza carved out her own path, fully aware of the challenges waiting ahead. Eliza Matthews entered New York's cutthroat financial world with nothing but determination and grit. From her first days at Goldman Sachs, she knew she had to work twice as hard as everyone else to prove herself. Without family backing, without inherited networks to open doors, Eliza started from the very bottom. She worked tirelessly, sacrificed her personal life, and dedicated herself completely to her career. Her relentless work ethic and drive quickly set her apart in an industry where competition was brutal every hour of every day. Eliza didn't just prove her technical skills. She created her own legacy, developing a risk assessment model that became a signature success for the firm. Her outstanding performance caught the attention of top executives, and not long after, Eliza became the youngest investment strategist in Goldman Sachs history, a title that earned universal respect. But for Eliza, even that wasn't a complete victory. Deep down, she still hoped that this achievement would finally unlock something she'd been chasing all her life, her father's pride. She worked not just out of passion but also because of a quiet, unspoken pain, the desperate longing to be seen and valued by her father. Eliza Matthews spent nearly all of her savings after years of hard work to buy her father a luxury Mercedes S-Class, an expensive gift that meant far more than just its price tag. To outsiders, it was just a fancy car, but to Eliza, it was her final effort, a fragile hope that this time her father would see her in a different light, that he would, for once, offer the praise she had always dreamed of hearing. She spent weeks researching, carefully selecting every detail, even finding the exact model her father had once casually admired during an offhand conversation. Eliza hoped this gift would become a bridge, a chance to finally break through the cold wall between them, an opportunity for her father to finally acknowledge the success she had built entirely on her own. The car wasn't just a symbol of filial piety, it was a silent plea, a final ticket she bet everything on, in the fragile hope of being recognized. Yet deep inside, Eliza knew that if even this couldn't soften her father's heart, perhaps nothing ever would. She risked a significant portion of her hard-earned savings just to buy one chance at being loved, a chance that, even as she made the purchase, felt painfully slim. Eliza Matthews had spent her entire youth chasing just one thing, her father's approval. Along the way, she sacrificed almost everything. She had no deep friendships, no time to build a romantic relationship, and never allowed herself the luxury of rest. Eliza always put her work first because she truly believed that only through extraordinary success would her father finally look at her with the same pride he had always reserved for her brother, James. But no matter what she achieved, Richard Matthews remained cold and dismissive. He never once acknowledged Eliza's efforts as meaningful. In his eyes, her accomplishments were nothing more than numbers on paper, temporary, shallow, and unworthy of his attention. Even when Eliza spent nearly all of her savings to buy him a luxury car, Richard saw it as nothing more than a flashy gesture, a passing show of wealth, not a sign of maturity. He didn't hesitate to show off the car to his friends, but completely ignored the daughter who had given it to him. That moment broke something inside Eliza. She realized that no matter how much she sacrificed, no matter how hard she fought, her father was never truly capable of recognizing her. His coldness had pushed her to the very edge. Eliza had always believed her father's harshness came from his disapproval of her career choices. But everything changed when she decided to take a DNA test, initially just out of curiosity about her ancestry. The results shattered her world. The genetic markers showed no match to Richard Matthews, the man she had called Dad for 32 years. That truth hit her like a brutal punch, instantly unraveling everything she thought she knew. Suddenly, the emotional distance, the constant rejection, and the lifelong criticism all made sense. Eliza couldn't accept it immediately. She secretly took another DNA sample from Richard's hairbrush during a visit home, hoping it was all some mistake. But when the second test returned the same result, Eliza was forced to face the painful reality. Richard Matthews was never her biological father. It explained why he had never loved her the way he did her siblings, why every effort she made had always been invisible to him. Eliza felt as though the ground had collapsed beneath her feet. All those years chasing his approval, all the sacrifices, all the pain, it had all been for someone who was never truly connected to her. She stood at a painful crossroads. Should she keep this secret to herself, or face it head-on and finally fight for her own truth? After receiving the initial results from the DNA testing service, Eliza was thrown into deep confusion. She couldn't believe the clear genetic data was telling her that Richard Matthews wasn't her biological father. But deep down, Eliza knew this wasn't something she could ignore or simply wish away. To be absolutely certain, she decided to quietly confirm the truth without telling anyone in her family or even her closest friends. During a visit to her family home, Eliza carefully collected a few strands of hair from Richard's personal hairbrush. Every step she took was deliberate, leaving no trace behind. With the sample in hand, Eliza sent it to an independent lab for a definitive answer. The waiting period was agonizing. She didn't even know what she was hoping for, whether she wanted the first result to be wrong or whether she wanted to finally have a clear explanation for her father's coldness. When the final results came back, all her lingering doubts vanished. Richard Matthews had no biological connection to her. The raw truth hit her like a tidal wave. All those years of chasing his love and validation had been a journey pointed at the wrong person from the very start. She had lived her whole life in a family she was never truly part of. After receiving the second DNA test result, Eliza Matthews wasn't just heartbroken, she became consumed by a haunting question. Had Richard Matthews known the truth all along? She began replaying every small detail from the past, his indifferent glances, his cold remarks, the way he cruelly dismissed her every effort. The more she thought about it, the more she believed that Richard's treatment of her had never been accidental. The way he constantly praised James, the special attention he gave Sophia, and the obvious emotional distance he kept from Eliza all pointed to something deliberate. It was as if, in Richard's eyes, her very existence was a stain on his life, a burden he had to tolerate but never truly accepted. Eliza became convinced that Richard had always seen the traces of another man in her, the biological father she had never known. That truth, buried deep in Richard's mind, seemed to have created an unbreakable wall between them from the very beginning. Suddenly, Eliza realized she had unknowingly spent her whole life fighting a battle her father had never intended to resolve. She had done everything to earn his love, but maybe, in his heart, she never had a place to begin with. Eliza Matthews spent months carefully planning to buy her father a luxury Mercedes S-Class, hoping this would be the gift that could finally break through the ice between them. She chose the exact model Richard had once admired in a casual conversation with his friends. Eliza believed this time her father wouldn't be able to ignore her efforts, that this gift would prove she was successful and deserving of his recognition. But the reality was far harsher. When Eliza brought the car to his house, Richard accepted it with a flat expression and a cold, obligatory thank you, as if he were receiving a meaningless social gift. Instead of acknowledging the love and sacrifice behind it, he immediately turned his focus to the car's technical details, asking about price, insurance, and maintenance costs, as if he were evaluating an investment. He quickly moved the car into the garage, out of sight, avoiding any chance for it to be displayed in front of their guests. Eliza stood there, realizing that no matter how much she tried, her father would always see her efforts as a waste. The gift she saw as her final bridge was nothing more than an object to Richard, stripped of all meaning. At that year's family reunion, Eliza Matthews had prepared everything meticulously, holding onto a small hope that, maybe this time, her father would finally acknowledge the life she had worked so hard to build. She chose her outfit carefully, kept a warm attitude, and even tried to create a cheerful atmosphere with the other guests. But those fragile hopes were quickly shattered when Richard Matthews, the head of the family, stood to make his traditional toast in front of relatives and close business partners. He began by praising James, proud of his brother's success in real estate, and then highlighted Sophia as the perfect daughter, someone who balanced family and community with grace. Eliza sat there, waiting, believing her turn would finally come, that maybe this year would be different. But what came next was the cruelest thing she had ever heard. "I'm proud of all my children except for the loser." Those words hit Eliza like a knife to the heart, and the room fell into stunned silence. Some people let out awkward, nervous laughs, others looked down, avoiding her gaze. Eliza struggled to stay composed, but inside, she was shattered. In front of her family, friends, and her father's business associates, Eliza had been publicly humiliated, cast out by the man she had always believed she belonged to. After Richard's brutal remark in the middle of the dinner, Eliza Matthews could no longer sit there. Years of silence, countless dismissed efforts, and a lifetime of emotional wounds had all reached their breaking point. For the first time in her life, Eliza stood up in front of her entire family, her father's friends, and business partners. Her voice was calm but firm, no more trembling, no more fear. She openly revealed the truth she had kept to herself for months. Richard Matthews had never been her biological father. Every word echoed clearly in the breathless silence of the room. She didn't sugarcoat it and didn't hesitate. Eliza explained the DNA testing process, the undeniable results, and her belief that Richard had always known this truth but had chosen to emotionally torment her for 32 years. She reached into her purse, pulled out the envelope containing the DNA test results, and placed it right in the center of the dinner table, where every pair of eyes was now locked on her as an irrefutable conclusion. Eliza didn't need to hear any explanations, didn't wait to see who would take her side or who would stay silent. With quiet determination, she turned and walked away from the room filled with familiar but distant faces, leaving behind all the expectations, all the pain, and the life she had clung to for so long. After leaving the DNA results on the dinner table and walking out of the house where she had spent her entire childhood, Eliza Matthews didn't look back. She headed straight for the Mercedes S-Class she had once gifted to Richard as proof of her devotion and tireless efforts. But today, that car was no longer a gift. It had become a symbol of everything she had sacrificed in vain. Eliza calmly pulled out the spare key, started the engine, and drove away without asking permission, without offering any explanation. Taking the car back wasn't just a physical act. It was her way of reclaiming all the years she had voluntarily poured into chasing the approval of a man who had never truly loved her. As she turned the car around, Eliza felt, for the first time, that she was finally steering her own life, no longer chasing anyone, no longer living for anyone else's expectations. The car, once a vessel of hope, had now become her vehicle to break free from false obligations, suffocating expectations, and years of invisible wounds. When Eliza glanced into the rearview mirror, she saw Richard's figure standing still in the distance, the DNA envelope still clutched in his hand. He stood there in silence, but Eliza knew this time he would have no chance to pull her back. That drive was a one-way journey, a door closing on all the meaningless sacrifices of the past 32 years. After Eliza Matthews walked out of the dinner party, leaving behind the DNA results and the undeniable truth, the entire Matthews family instantly fell into unprecedented chaos. Richard Matthews, once known for his calm, his ability to control every situation, completely lost his composure. He screamed in rage, ripped open the envelope, and devoured every line of the report, desperately hoping for some mistake. But every number, every piece of data was clear, irrefutable. Richard suddenly looked shaken, no longer able to maintain his usual commanding presence. He shouted, demanding that someone find Eliza. He called her phone over and over again, but Eliza was gone, without a trace. Meanwhile, Eliza's mother, Caroline, completely broke down. She sat frozen in her chair, her face pale, gripping her napkin as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. In front of friends and family, Caroline said nothing. She sat in silence, her tear-filled eyes reflecting the weight of all the secrets she had buried for the past 32 years, now dragged fully into the light. The atmosphere of the party immediately collapsed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, eyes darted around the room in panic and confusion. From a family that had always seemed perfect, everything unraveled in just a few minutes. Richard lost control. Caroline crumbled. And everyone else sat in shock, staring at the undeniable truth that had just torn their world apart. After Eliza Matthews walked out of the dinner party in silent finality, leaving behind countless missed calls from her family, there was only one call she chose to answer, Sophia's. Sophia, her younger sister, always the one known for her grace and sensitivity, was the only voice Eliza wanted to hear. Sophia didn't accuse her, didn't demand explanations. She simply asked where Eliza was and whether she was safe. In her voice was nothing but sincere concern, completely free of judgment. Amid the chaos Eliza had just set in motion, between James's threats and Richard's furious rage, Sophia was the only one who truly stood by her side. Deep down, Eliza knew Sophia must have been just as shaken, but still, she called. Sophia quietly told Eliza that the family was in turmoil. Richard had completely lost control. Their mother had collapsed emotionally, but none of that mattered more than the fact that Eliza had found the truth and had the courage to speak it. Sophia admitted that she had seen the unfairness in their family for years, but had never found the strength to confront their father. Today, Eliza had done what Sophia had always dreamed of but never dared to attempt. Sophia encouraged Eliza to keep moving forward, to never look back, to never let herself be dragged back into the old cycle. In Sophia's warm words, Eliza felt a deep, genuine connection, proof that even if she no longer belonged to the Matthews family, there was still one person who truly stood by her. Sophia was the only remaining thread tying Eliza to the Matthews name. Days after the family was thrown into crisis, Eliza's mother, Caroline, reached out and asked to meet her at a small cafe far away from the family's estate, as if she needed to step outside their familiar world in order to speak the truth. In that quiet space, Caroline confessed the truth Eliza had waited 32 years to hear directly. She told Eliza that she was not Richard Matthews's biological daughter, but the result of a deep college romance with a man named Thomas Keller. Thomas had been a brilliant student at MIT, a good man, but someone Caroline's family had never approved of due to his lack of social status. Their love had been torn apart by family pressure and societal expectations. Later, Caroline met Richard at a charity event. When she discovered she was pregnant with Thomas's child, she chose to marry Richard to protect her reputation and future. Richard agreed to let Eliza carry the Matthews name, but deep down, he had never truly accepted her as his own. Caroline admitted she had wanted to tell Eliza many times, but was always paralyzed by fear of Richard's power, fear of what would happen if the truth came out. She believed that Richard had known the truth from the beginning but chose to bury it, punishing Eliza with coldness as his silent form of revenge. Her mother's confession didn't bring Eliza more pain. Instead, it felt like a long-awaited explanation. A missing piece that finally made sense of all the years Eliza had suffered in silence. Eliza Matthews's mother admitted that her marriage to Richard Matthews had never started with love. It was a forced choice, a desperate decision to protect her personal reputation and her family's social standing. When she found out she was pregnant with Thomas Keller, her first love from college, Caroline had fallen into a corner with no way out. Faced with the suffocating expectations of her family, harsh social norms, and the terrifying prospect of public shame, she agreed to Richard Matthews's marriage proposal. Richard, ambitious and determined to rise in the world, knew perfectly well that the child Caroline was carrying wasn't his. Still, he agreed to accept Eliza, to let her bear the Matthews name, on one strict condition: the truth would remain buried forever. But that acceptance only existed on paper and for public display. Deep down, Richard never truly considered Eliza his daughter. He always kept his distance, treating her like a permanent stain on his life. Something he could never erase. The years Eliza spent desperately trying to earn his approval were, in reality, years of quiet punishment for a mistake she had never made. Caroline confessed that she had wanted to tell Eliza the truth many times, but always chose silence, fearing it would destroy the family, fearing that Richard would cruelly abandon both of them. For 32 years, Eliza had lived a borrowed life, one where she was never truly allowed to belong. After learning the truth from her mother, Eliza Matthews quietly began searching for Thomas Keller, the biological father she had never met. By tracing old records, alumni directories, and social media connections, Eliza found him. He was now living in California, a respected owner of a successful engineering firm. Eliza sent him a short letter, no blame, no demands, just a simple introduction and a quiet sharing of the truth that had been stolen from them for 32 years. A few days later, she received a reply. Thomas expressed shock, but his response was warm and sincere. He didn't deny or avoid the situation. Instead, he expressed a genuine desire to meet her, if she was ready. For the first time in her life, Eliza felt seen and respected by the man who shared her blood. Their first meeting took place in a small cafe in New York, no expectations, no pressure. Thomas listened patiently as Eliza shared her story, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding, something she had never once seen from Richard Matthews. They didn't try to force a father-daughter bond overnight. Instead, Eliza and Thomas Keller slowly built their relationship from simple, honest conversations and warm, pressure-free meetings. With Thomas, Eliza didn't have to prove anything. For the first time, she felt truly seen, accepted simply for being herself. After everything, Eliza Matthews gradually realized an essential truth she had missed for 32 years. Family is not defined by bloodlines or biological ties. It's defined by genuine love and unconditional acceptance. Eliza had spent nearly her entire life chasing Richard Matthews's approval, the man she once believed to be her father. But he never truly opened his heart to her. He placed impossible standards on her shoulders, set expectations she could never meet, and in the end, dismissed all her achievements as meaningless. Meanwhile, the people she once thought were only supporting characters in her life gave her the warmth she had always longed for. Sophia, her sister who always stood by her side. Her mother, who found the courage to tell the truth. And especially Thomas Keller, her biological father, who welcomed her not out of duty, but with genuine sincerity. Through simple conversations with Thomas, Eliza experienced what it was like to be truly listened to and respected for who she really was. She no longer needed to exhaust herself striving for perfection. She no longer had to prove her worth through accomplishments. Eliza finally understood that a real family consists of those who are willing to accept and love her with all her imperfections, all her scars, no conditions, no bargaining. That kind of acceptance, that's the home she had been searching for all along. After Eliza Matthews walked away from the family dinner and reclaimed the Mercedes S-Class, Richard Matthews quickly responded in the cold, predictable way she had come to know. He didn't call Eliza. He didn't attempt to reconcile. Instead, he immediately contacted his lawyer. Richard sent Eliza a formal legal notice, demanding that she return the car immediately and threatening to sue her for unauthorized possession of property. He made no mention of their relationship, no acknowledgement of the pain Eliza had endured. His only focus was ownership and personal reputation. To Richard, everything was a transaction, including family. In contrast, Thomas Keller, the father Eliza had just found, chose a completely different path. Thomas didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her. He patiently reached out to Eliza with gentle, sincere words. He expressed his desire to understand her life and to build a real relationship, fully aware of how many years they had already lost. Thomas didn't want gifts. He didn't care about status. He simply wanted to be called Dad in the most natural, heartfelt way. Between the two men, one clinging to pride and property, the other offering genuine connection, Eliza found her answer. The stark contrast between Richard and Thomas made it clear to Eliza who truly deserved to be called family. After the explosive family dinner, James Matthews, the brother who had always been favored by Richard, chose complete silence. He didn't call, didn't text, and made no public attempt to defend or criticize Eliza. James's silence wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he had never been willing to stand on the side of the truth if it meant going against his father. James remained Richard's heir, and in his world, family was tied to reputation and a carefully arranged order. Eliza's public revelation of the DNA results didn't just fracture personal relationships, it threatened the polished image the Matthews family had spent years cultivating. For James, the most important thing was preserving the system that benefited him, even if it meant distancing himself from his sister. In contrast, Sophia became the sole bridge remaining between Eliza and the Matthews family. Sophia didn't choose silence like James, nor did she turn her back like Richard. She was the first to call Eliza after everything unfolded, the one who persistently stayed in touch, and the only person who genuinely wanted to preserve their sisterly bond. Sophia quietly listened to Eliza without judgment, never pressuring her to come back. It was Sophia's sincerity that allowed Eliza to hold on to a sliver of hope, that someone within the Matthews family truly loved her for who she was, not because of a name or bloodline. After leaving the Matthews family and facing Richard's legal demands for the return of the car, Eliza Matthews made her final decision. She no longer wished to maintain any ties to the man she once called father. The Mercedes S-Class, a gift she had once poured her heart energy, and a significant portion of her savings into had completely lost its original meaning. Eliza drove the car to a dealership and quickly sold it. The money she received wasn't insignificant, but what mattered more was the feeling of letting go. She had once used the car as a ticket to buy approval, but now she understood she didn't need to buy anyone's affection, especially not Richard's. Eliza used the money to invest in her own future, into personal projects and plans she had long set aside while chasing her father's approval. Selling the car wasn't just a financial decision, it was a silent declaration. She had freed herself from all ties to Richard Matthews, both material and emotional. From that moment on, Eliza officially stepped out of her old family shadow, choosing to live her own life, no longer bound by fake expectations or the conditional love she had pursued for 32 years. After severing all ties with Richard Matthews and walking away from the painful past, Eliza Matthews began her journey of self-healing. She decided to attend therapy, a choice she had once dismissed as unnecessary. For 32 years, Eliza had lived in a cycle of chasing approval from a cold, distant father. When it all collapsed, she realized she no longer knew how to live for herself. The first therapy sessions weren't easy. Eliza had to confront the deep wounds she had long buried. She learned to revisit her childhood, to accept that the pain Richard inflicted wasn't her fault, and to let go of the outdated expectations she had carried throughout her life. Through each session, Eliza came to understand that her worth didn't depend on anyone's praise, validation, or conditional love. She began to rebuild her life on her own terms, focusing on work she was passionate about, genuine relationships, and things that brought her peace. Eliza no longer worked to prove herself to Richard or anyone else. She learned to live for herself. From a woman once haunted by rejection, Eliza slowly stepped into the light, writing a new chapter of her life filled with true freedom and peace. After everything, the relationship between Eliza Matthews and her mother, Caroline, entered a new, honest phase, one that no longer hid behind polite facades. For 32 years, Eliza had always felt a silent wall between them. Caroline, though gentle, always chose silence, avoidance, and never once defended Eliza against Richard's harshness. That silence once made Eliza feel abandoned by her own mother. But when the truth came to light, when Caroline confessed what she had buried for decades, Eliza began to understand that her mother was also a victim, trapped by social pressure and forced choices. Their conversations gradually became more open and honest, no more small talk, no more shallow reassurances. For the first time, Eliza allowed herself to express her pain, her anger, and the disappointment she had long suppressed. Caroline listened, without excuses, without shifting blame. That honest acknowledgement became the foundation for rebuilding their relationship. Eliza slowly began to feel her mother's genuine presence, not the passive woman who had once stood quietly beside Richard, but a mother who was now trying to make amends and offer healing. From old cracks, their bond began to heal, slowly but steadily, as both chose to release old burdens and accept each other with unconditional sincerity. After exchanging letters and phone calls, Eliza Matthews was finally ready to meet Thomas Keller, the biological father she had never known for 32 years. Their first meeting took place in a small cafe in New York, simple, unplanned, and most importantly, free of any pressure. Eliza walked in cautiously, carrying both excitement and lingering doubts. But Thomas was in no rush. He didn't try to fill the 3-decade gap with promises or forced gestures. He simply listened, patiently, allowing Eliza to voice her thoughts, her pain, and the hopes she had never dared to share with Richard Matthews. Through each meeting, Eliza felt Thomas's sincerity and gentleness. He never demanded to be called Dad right away, nor did he force his way into her life. They chose to start with simple things, casual walks, everyday conversations, and even sitting in silence without feeling awkward. Eliza gradually realized that family bonds don't need to be rushed or validated by titles. Thomas gave her the space to be herself, to enter this relationship at her own pace. For the first time, Eliza experienced a relationship free of the burden of earning acceptance, a connection where love didn't have to be fought for. That year's Thanksgiving marked the first time Eliza Matthews made an important decision for herself, free from the pressures of family expectations. She chose not to attend the traditional gathering at Richard Matthews's house, a place where, for 32 years, she had always shown up, hoping to be accepted. This time, Eliza refused to subject herself to staged dinners, shallow well-wishes, and silent judgmental glances. Instead, she chose to spend Thanksgiving with Sophia, the only family member who had truly stood by her, the last genuine bond she had left with the Matthews family. Thanksgiving at Sophia's home was nothing like the ostentatious rituals at Richard's house. There were no grand speeches, no performances of success, no suffocating formalities. There, Eliza sat at the table as someone truly loved, someone free to laugh, to share openly, and to feel the warmth she had long craved since childhood. Sophia and her small family welcomed Eliza not out of duty or family tradition, but because they genuinely wanted her there. Eliza no longer had to earn approval, nor did she need to uphold a facade of strength. For the first time, she felt at ease, like she truly belonged. When she received the invitation from Richard, Eliza quietly set it aside, a silent yet firm and peaceful refusal. She had chosen her path and her family. One quiet evening after Thanksgiving, Eliza Matthews received a phone call from her mother, Caroline, a conversation that unexpectedly touched her deeply. It was no longer a stiff, obligatory chat like before. This time, Caroline's voice was warm and sincere. She said she had always watched over Eliza, not as a mother bound by social expectations, but as a mother genuinely proud of her daughter. Caroline admitted that for many years, she too had believed that children needed grand achievements to earn their parents' pride. But after everything Eliza had gone through and bravely overcome, she realized true pride didn't come from status, wealth, or shining accolades. She was proud of Eliza simply because Eliza was Eliza, a resilient woman who dared to face the truth, dared to let go of what no longer served her, and most importantly, chose her own life. Caroline said she should have said these words long ago, but even now, she wanted Eliza to know she no longer needed to fight to be loved. Her mother's love was unconditional. That phone call didn't change the past, but it helped Eliza release some of her pain and open the door to a real mother-daughter relationship, one without pretense or fear. After a long journey of pain and struggle, Eliza Matthews finally came to understand something she had never realized in 32 years. Self-worth does not come from the approval of others, especially not from someone who was never willing to accept her. Throughout her childhood and adult life, Eliza had trapped herself in an invisible race, chasing the one thing she thought mattered, Richard Matthews's approval, the man she once called father. She had worked relentlessly, sacrificing love, friendships, and her own time, all for a nod of approval that never came. But when she let go of the car, walked away from the house she once called home, and began her new journey, Eliza realized she never needed anyone to define her worth. She didn't need diplomas, public accolades, or Richard's acceptance, the man who had rejected her from the day she was born. Eliza's true worth lay in her resilience, in her courage to stand up, to speak the truth, and to choose the life she wanted. She began to cherish herself not because she was better than anyone else, but because she deserved love, freedom, and the right to be herself. Eliza understood that happiness doesn't exist in other people's eyes, it lives in the peace of being authentically you. After a painful and transformative journey, Eliza Matthews finally learned a profound lesson. Family isn't defined by blood, It's defined by the people who truly love, accept, and respect you for who you are. For 32 years, Eliza had believed that blood ties were unbreakable, that they were the foundation of what made a family. She spent her entire life chasing Richard Matthews's approval, desperate to be fully accepted as part of the Matthews family. But all she ever received in return was rejection, coldness, and public humiliation in front of relatives and friends. When the truth about her DNA was finally revealed, Eliza realized that blood means nothing without genuine love. Family isn't about names on legal papers or who appears on a family tree. It's about those who choose to stand by you, not out of obligation, not because of tradition, but simply because they truly want you to be happy. Eliza found her true family in the people she had once overlooked: Sophia, her sister who always stayed by her side; Thomas Keller, her biological father who was willing to build a relationship from the beginning; and her mother, who finally learned to say "I love you" without hesitation. To Eliza, family now means being surrounded by people who let her be herself, where she no longer has to fight to be accepted. Eliza's story shows us that sometimes, in order to protect our self-worth, we must find the courage to walk away from people who share our blood. She used to believe family was something you could never leave, that no matter the pain, she had to cling to it. But harsh reality taught her a painful truth. Richard Matthews's approval had never existed, and the love he offered was nothing but a hollow shadow. Eliza realized that staying in a family that didn't truly accept her was only a way to keep hurting herself. Walking away from Richard and those like James, who chose silence, wasn't betrayal. It was the necessary act of courage to save herself. Eliza chose her own path, chose to live for her own happiness, even if it meant turning her back on relationships that were once defined by blood. She dared to protect her true worth, dared to stand up and walk away, dared to break free from the toxic cycle that had trapped her for 32 years. That decision led her to rediscover her true self, to find the freedom and peace she had always deserved. Sometimes, you must be willing to let go of the people you once called family to truly find yourself. Eliza understood this and had the courage to move forward, no longer afraid. Her story offers us a powerful message. Sometimes, the most painful thing isn't being rejected. It's realizing that we have to let go of those tied to us by blood in order to protect our own well-being. Family isn't always about biology. It's about those who choose to love and accept us exactly as we are, without conditions or judgment. In life, there are relationships we think we can never let go of, but holding on can often prolong unnecessary pain. Standing up for yourself and walking away from what no longer fits is the way to find freedom, peace, and a more meaningful life. Eliza's story is a reminder, especially to our older audience, that it's never too late to choose your family, to rebuild honest connections, and to fully love yourself. If you've ever felt lost in your own home, remember this. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be respected. Please share this story with someone you care about. They may need this encouragement, too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story and continue spreading these positive life values together.